Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Jim. Here. Ted. Show Ted absent. Tom.
Here.
Stacy.
Here.
Cecil is absent. And Blake.
Here.
And I'm here. Item 3, or actually item 4. Approval of minutes. We have any comments, changes? If there are none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move for approval of the July 12th, 2022 Basehor Planning Commission.
I'll second. All in favor? Blake?
Yes.
Stacy?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Jim? Yes. I vote yes. Minutes are approved. Unfinished business, we have none. New business, item 5. PSUP -001-22 flag mounted sign at VFW, which is at 2806 North 155th Street.
Thank you very much. Marshall Allen, Acting Zoning Administrator. Tonight, we have an application for a special use permit for an electronic sign. The applicant is Charlotte Gamino, who I don't see here tonight, but Charlotte Gamino with Sherrill Signs Incorporated on behalf of the property owner VFW Post 11499. The applicant is requesting approval of a special use permit for a double-faced full-color electronic sign in the public right-of-way on the front of the building located at 2806 North 155th Street. The property is zoned CP1, Neighborhood Business District. It's surrounded by CP1 on the north, R1, which is our single-family residential to the south, CP1 to the east, and R1 to the west. The legal description is Lot 5, Block 2, Town of Basehor. So the applicant is requesting to install a 3-foot by 5-foot double-faced full-color electronic sign, also known as a changeable copy sign per the Basehor sign code, to be flag mounted to existing wood posts on the exterior of the building with stringers back to the concrete wall and a steel plate connection to the existing wood post. The sign located on the second floor of the building will extend into the 155th Street public right-of-way. Staff comments, section 8.1 of the City of Basehor sign regulations state that any sign erected, installed, or replaced on the right-of-way of any street, road, or public way, or signs overhanging or infringing upon the right-of-way of any street, road, or public way are prohibited. The sign regulations do allow for the issuance of a special use permit for any signs which are not specifically permitted under the sign ordinance. In the case of special use permits, all signs shall be approved by the Planning Commission and or City Council. And in reviewing such signs, the Planning Commission shall take the following into consideration. The use of the facility as stated was the Basehor VFW Post 11499. The height of the building is approximately 25 to 30 feet. Excuse me. The surrounding land uses and zoning districts was previously stated on the first page of the staff report. The relationship of the site to the surrounding roadway systems. The VFW is a historic structure located right in the heart of Basehor. And as stated, it's located directly on the 155th Street public right-of-way. The right-of-way includes multiple perpendicular parking spaces, which are utilized by VFW members and the adjacent Basehor Historical Society. The topography of the site is generally flat, but there is a gradual north-south slope extending along 155th Street from approximately Hickory Street to the south and Olive Street to the north. The duration, the issuance of the special use permit would be permanent, subject to compliance with the public right-of-way encroachment agreement, which we'll discuss further. This public right-of-way encroachment agreement will be signed by all parties prior to the issuance of a sign permit, and is a stipulation of approval for the special use permit. The agreement will include language regarding responsibilities of maintenance and liabilities. Basehor sign regulations state that no changeable copy signs shall be erected without a light detector / photo cell or a scheduled dimming timer by which the sign's brightness shall be dimmed when ambient light conditions darken. The applicant has stated that the sign will be automatically dimmed or brightened based around seasonally adjusted sunrise and sunset times. A 100-step photo cell is available to control brightness. The photo cell will respond to actual light conditions. Basehor sign regulations state that changeable copy signs shall be turned off no later than 10 p.m. if located within 100 feet and or abutting a residentially zoned district. This regulation does apply to this sign application. The applicant has stated that the provided digital signage software allows for scheduling of content to automatically turn the sign on and off as required. The Basehor sign regulations also state that illumination for changeable copy signs shall not exceed 70-foot candles as measured at a distance of 2 feet from the source of light. The applicant has stated that the proposed LED sign will be factory configured not to exceed 70-foot candles when measured at 2 feet. Installation instructions for the hardware required to hang the sign were requested by the city's building inspector and were submitted by the applicant. The building inspector has approved the submitted materials. The city's building inspector also requested to see information for the sign's electrical requirements. Applicant has stated that the EMC will be 120 volt, 18 amps, which is 9 amps per phase, single phase service. This information did satisfy the building inspector's request. As previously stated, the sign is located on the second floor of the building. The attachments that are included in your packet tonight show what the sign will look like and the general placement of that sign on the second floor. Given the location of the building directly on the right-of-way line, this sign will extend into the public right-of-way by approximately 5 feet. Given the location of the sign on the second floor of the VFW, the right-of-way encroachment agreement, which is to be signed by all parties, the adherence to the requirements of changeable copy signs as stipulated by the Basehor sign regulations, and the importance of the VFW to the Basehor community, city staff does request approval of the electronic sign. And I'll just say real quick that the right-of-way encroachment agreement is a rather common thing to be drafted in a case like this, an old historic building in a downtown setting that are located right on the public right of way. So staff recommends approval of the special use permit for the request electronic sign with the following stipulations: that public right of way encroachment agreement will be agreed to and signed by all parties prior to the issuance of a sign permit.
Do we have any questions? Jim?
No.
Tom?
I might have a couple.
Okay.
When we're talking about signed by all parties, could you name all those parties, please?
Yes, city staff and the VFW.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's gonna be larger. Was there any requirement that any of the adjacent property owners be notified?
To my knowledge, there is not a requirement
Okay.
for that.
Okay, and I'm in favor of this, but I'm gonna ask this question anyway. We talk about how this is a little bit different from our normal policy. It's a little bit of a variation, and we're allowing it, we're recommending that we allow it, but all the other stipulations are being requested to remain intact. Why is that? So am I reading it correctly where our current sign regulations would not allow this normally?
Correct. It says
Okay.
that a sign extending into the public right of way
Okay.
would not be allowed.
And then, but we're actually requiring a lot of the stipulations that are already in place to remain in place.
Mhm.
So
Right.
why just that difference?
I think it comes down to, they're meeting all the requirements of a changeable copy sign. So they're helping their case in that sense. It's worth saying that the sign code will be going through an amendment process coming up soon. So having language in there regarding right of way encroachment agreements, I believe will be added to that to add some clarity. And then just recognizing the fact that the VFW is a cherished member of our community. So definitely want to make sure that we can work with them to get their sign approved.
I would also add that because of the building location, the street location, the road easement comes far enough that there's just not much, no choice.
Yeah.
If they want to sign.
I understand. One last question about kind of the on-off times. We talk about adjusted for sunrise and sunset, but then it talks about turning off at 10 p.m. How does all that work?
I mean, I'm not as, what's that? Yeah, I believe so. I'm
Okay.
not a sign tech, but I would believe that as the sun gets down, the ambient light reduces, that the sign would dim
Perfect.
prior to turning off at 10 p.m.
Thank you very much.
Stacy, you have anything?
I have no questions.
No, I just want to thank the VFW for truly being cherished members of our society and taking good care of our community and the great service you provide. We appreciate you very much.
I have, what if the software fails? To do the dimming, the shut off,
Well,
and
it's
it doesn't, it either doesn't shut off completely or it doesn't dim like it's supposed to.
yeah.
Is there a reporting process that somebody needs to call? Because at that time of day, nobody's going to be at City Hall, so.
Yeah.
I may, I think the process would just be that, once we do have notification of that, if they weren't aware, certainly we would reach out to them, give them notice of it. I mean, we can always go through the code enforcement process, but typically on something like that, just a quick phone call, quick letter saying, hey, this is not in compliance. Can you turn it off until the software is updated and it's back in compliance?
And when
Right.
you say them,
Through
VFW.
VFW, yes. Yeah, we would reach out to them. And then once we have an indication that that's been repaired, we'd send somebody out just to verify that. And say, yeah, fine, turn it back on.
just trying to avoid complaints.
Right, absolutely. And honestly, more than likely, you're right. We wouldn't know about it at the city hall until someone lets us know. And so certainly we'd reach out as soon as we have that information.
Thank you. And who does the inspections? It says installation instructions. The building inspector has approved. City inspector, this.
I believe that would be Willie, right? Willie Nagel, the
Okay.
city building inspector.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Anybody have anything else? I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, Blake Waters, I make the motion to approve the special use permit for flag mounted LED sign at VFW post 11499 located at 2806 North 155th Street.
This is Jim Owen. I'll second that.
All in favor? Jim?
Aye.
Tom?
Yes.
Stacy?
Yes.
Blake?
Yes.
Vote yes, motion passes 5-0. Item 6. Zoning regulation, text amendment, simplify solar and wind energy permit applications. Public hearing is required.
Yes, thank you. I know the cover sheet says that I will present this, but I'm actually going to turn it over to my colleague Chris Shires, who will be presenting this agenda item.
All right, Chair and Commission members, I'm Christopher Shires with Confluence, one of your hired consultants, assisting the city of Basehor with numerous code updates, including eventually your sign code, mainly because I'm tired of assisting us with regulating and enforcing it. It's a little outdated. And so even what we talked about tonight will be updated to not require going through quite such a process, a little more of a standard by right, because it is in a downtown setting. So for tonight's presentation, what I want to walk through is a quick update we are proposing to make to the city code to help address kind of a reoccurring item that's coming before the commission and the council. These conditional use permits for solar installations on homes. It's a very typical thing, something we're seeing more often. And so in that fashion, what we're in essence, and I'll go through this, proposing to make it a by right, that if you meet the standards, that you can install solar panels on your house as what we'll, and I'll define what we mean as an accessory use. However, if you're going to be a freestanding solar system, such as an array in the backyard or a special car park, like you see in some cities, that you're still going to go through that conditional use permit process. Or if you're any type of a wind energy system, that you'll go through the conditional use permit process. Two new things that we'll address, though, is we're only suggesting that we permit what we call accessory generation, accessory solar, accessory wind energy, rather than what we sometimes consider utility scale. And that's where somebody's doing a wind or solar farm as a utility or as to sell to a utility for more general commercial use. Those are things we tend to see more outside of the city and not necessarily on really high value city land. So in one essence, we're wanting to make this very easy and permissive for this accessory solar on people's homes or on businesses to be the same process. Maintain their standards for the less likely accessory wind energy. They're much less efficient systems. We tend not to see those. And of course, saying at least within the community of Basehor, within the city limits, we're not allowing that utility scale solar or wind. And so with that, we're suggesting this is going to the end of Article 8, which is our kind of supplemental everything else district regulations. And as we come forward with our code updates for the entire city code, if you recommend approval of this and the council so adopts this, this would just carry forward. And so what we're trying not to do is create new nonconformities. And so this would be kind of a carryover ordinance with that larger code update that's in process. And like I said, now is including your sign code, just because we really want to do that. So first, we always talk about the intent. Why are we doing this? So we're wanting to regulate for good reason. We don't want to over-regulate. So we're always trying to meet kind of the needs necessary, but then we do need to define terms. And then just a couple of things. I won't go through all of them unless there's something you want me to pause and go into greater detail, but really defining what we mean by accessory solar, and that's intended for on-site use. That does mean somebody can go through the net metering with the utility company. So in really great generation, middle of the day, you're generating a lot of electrical power, you can push it back to the power company and they'll give you a credit for it. And then at night, when you're generating nothing, you're in essence buying it back from the power company. And so that is still permissive under this accessory. So we're not saying it has to only be for on-site use, but that intent is it's scaled for just that commercial business or just the use of that home, that you're not a regular, you're not as in essence a utility provider. Then we define obviously the difference between building integrated, meaning it's on an existing structure or it's ground mounted. And then just some of the other little definitions in terms of what we need. And so if we go on to page 20, at the top of the page under general regulations, really define the three different types. And this is just solar. And I'll do the same thing when we get to the wind section, section 9. There's building integrated, roof mounted, and building mounted accessory solar. And so that's basically, again, when you're putting it on an existing building or accessory building. There's ground mounted. That's when it's its own separate structure intended to hold up a solar panel or solar collection system. And then solar energy, and that last one, that solar energy systems that are principal use, think of that again as utility scale. We're defining that so we can say, hey, those are not something permitted within the city of Basehor. Hopefully that's as clear as mud. And one other thing I meant to define up front is in today's age, we tend to think of solar generation as mainly photovoltaic panels. That's the direct sunlight to electrical conversion. And of course, there's the inverter and some of the electrical equipment with it. We tend not to actually see solar collectors, and that's where you're generating, you're taking solar energy and making heat and say boiling water. We tend not to say that. Now, this still has regulations to deal with that. In the rare case, we might see one of those. And then we talk about building height. And so in the case of building mounted, in essence, we're meeting the height standards of that building or accessory structure, whether it's commercial or residential or industrial property. Same thing with the setbacks, we're meeting the setbacks of that structure. Now, when it's standalone, ground mounted. We're wanting them to meet, in the case being the backyard or the rear yard, and meeting that accessory structure building setbacks, and then putting an overall height limit on it. Then as we go to page 21, talk a little bit about visibility, ideally trying to have them minimally visible, except on those building mounted. We have some standards in place for what that looks like for building mounted. So mainly those aesthetic considerations are in place for the freestanding ground mounted. And of course, if it is a heat generation type system, that we're taking care with the reflectors not causing offsite glare. And then just a little bit of boilerplate dealing with all those other little things we've got to think about, that we're needing a building permit, that they've got to have an application in with us, that we have to issue them a building permit, unless they're going through the conditional use permit process. And then some of the other little things we want to be careful that nothing in us granting somebody approval is giving them some kind of a solar access easement over their neighbor. So if their neighbor plants a tree and it suddenly blocks their system, the city has nothing to do with it. That's their own issue. And then some, from enforcement standpoint, some right of entry to make sure the system is safe or not running or whatever's going on. So before we go on to wind, any question on the solar energy side of things?
Yes.
Please.
On item J, under removal, that all makes sense, but who's gonna check and how often will they check?
To that page here. So sometimes in the code, you know, we kind of say this before, that we as the city staff don't tend to go looking for trouble, but if we're in trouble, we need a code to have to deal with it. And so this is in that rare situation that we have an old, abandoned, dilapidated system that we have the right, typically we would have the judge give us extra permission, but we have the right to compel the property owner to give us rights to inspect. And so it would be a city action, as the zoning administrator, the city administrator would have to take care of, or we pawn it off on the city attorney. So.
Thank you.
Great question. And you will see that same kind of language on wind, as well as when we eventually get you an ordinance dealing with towers, in this case, mostly cell towers. Same kind of thing.
I thought I understood to answer this question, you had to get a judge to approve. Did I misunderstand?
Yeah, and I was talking a little bit, kind of sometimes we think through process. This is giving us kind of that default, the code says we have the right. Sometimes though, we still go to a judge to confirm that. So
Okay.
just kind of acknowledging that sometimes we don't just go run onto a piece of property to do something. We still want somebody to say, yep, city, you are following what your rules say. This does make sense. There's been a fair hearing.
So that, and it would go back to the city inspector in this case also.
Right.
You have any more comments?
No, sir.
Back under height. The third one down, solar carports in non-residential districts shall not exceed 20 feet in height.
Right. So
What, I guess my question is, if it's solar carports in non-residential, is that a business carport?
So what we tend to start seeing now show up is, say you've got a commercial business, even a fast food restaurant, and you have a parking lot. It is becoming more common, especially as we head farther south, for them to install, in essence, a canopy over their parking lot and have solar panels on it. In fact, I think we'll see that even more with car dealerships. It's a way to generate power. And frankly, it's a way to help pay for the canopy to protect their cars from hail.
So. I guess.
So we could make it
Getting-
taller if you want, but that was kind of
Well,
the rule of thumb on.
I
20
thought
foot.
this all pertained to accessory solar systems
And
as opposed to commercial, which that would be correct.
And in the case of, then that is still very much the case.
Well,
So in
primary.
this case, the that solar carport over the part of the parking lot or a parking lot of a business would still only be intended to generate the electricity demand of that business, which from a permitting standpoint outside of the city's control is typical. Since you have to go through quite a hurdle to be a commercial power generator. You in essence are becoming a franchise electrical generator. And so a car dealership's not going to go through that kind of advanced process, but they use a lot of power to light their systems, to run their air conditioning. And so they can still have a decent size solar array that's still really only for their own use. Again, thinking net meter.
So they're still connected to commercial and power generation company. Okay.
And in fact, if I may, I didn't want to spend too much time or if you guys already are kind of familiar with this, the typical way it works is if you do this on your home or business, you're going to size an electrical, the number of panels you're going to have, assuming you had unlimited roof space or space, is not going to exceed what you're going to generate for power, say, in a month. Because in most cases, you only get to do this net metering on a month-by-month basis. Because once you go above, so let's say I use 3,000 kilowatt hours a month. And I have an electrical system that in May can generate 3,200 kilowatt hours a month. That extra 200 kilowatt hours, I'm getting almost nothing for. Because on a net metering basis, I get kind of a 1-to-1 ratio. In essence, you think the meter spins backwards. It's actually a little more complicated. And so there's not really a benefit to overgenerate. And if you truly are a utility scale generator, you've got to go through another whole licensing permitting process to be able to sell it, if you will, on the open market. So it's more of an interconnect agreement. So most every single solar system on any business or house is connected to the power grid. In fact, on a very frustrating note, if your power goes out, your solar system automatically shuts down. It's a safety thing so that you're not backfeeding the power. So don't ask me why I know so much. We have it on our building in Des Moines. So it's quite a little bit of work, but funny enough, it's from a financial standpoint, actually quite worth it. So it's really not worth over generating. And you always are connected to the grid. And as time goes by and we get better batteries, there could be a point where people are not connected to the grid at all, but that's still price prohibitive and the battery technology is not quite there.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question.
Thank you. I think that's all. And
Yeah.
All right, well, if you don't mind, let's go through section 9. This is talking about accessory wind energy systems, really consistent, except for we have some additional regulations in there because I don't want to call it a nuisance. There tends to be a little more impact from wind. We have shadow flicker, we have noise. It is something spinning in the air and it tends to have height. Now, frankly, we do need to have some regulations on it, but we tend not to see them in town. Those small ones we're buying, they're not very efficient. They don't tend to pay for themselves the way solar does. Now, at a utility scale, it sure does. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. But nobody's necessarily interested in spending hundreds of thousands of dollars for something that has a shorter lifespan than what they might see in payback. But we should have regulations on it. So again, the intent, and then we go through those definitions and that big first one being accessory wind energy systems, AWS for short. Again, it's an accessory use. So there's already a principal use. It's a house, it's a business, and we're only intending to generate the power needs of that for that business. You could have them building mounted. Those are rare. They're typically freestanding. We talk about how we measure height. We talk about shadow flicker, what that means. And just like it sounds, as the blades are spinning and there's multiple types, vertical axis, horizontal axis, the sunlight going through them does produce a flicker that bothers some people. And so we kind of think about that with setbacks. And then as we flip to page 24, under that general regulation, and we talk about kind of the process and the zoning. So in all cases, It's going to require a conditional use permit through commission and council. And it's only if it's an accessory use. And then we talk about limiting the number on any lot. And then all those setback regulations. In this case, we had to be think a bit about them a little bit different. And so in this case, that 150% setback from all property lines based on its height. So think of that as a 1.5 to 1 kind of ratio. So a 100-foot tower would need a 150-foot setback from all property lines. And that's really to help address the aesthetics, noise, shadow flicker. When we set some maximum heights based on lot sizes as well, how close the blades can be from the ground. And this is based on the pole of the wind generator type. And then kind of everything else on the bottom of page 25 through 26 is a lot of the safety considerations. Just make sure they're in place because it is a large spinning moving object. And then at the bottom of 26, we just get into that conditional use permit process. Since it is a spinning apparatus, we need that engineer's certification on how it's installed, whether it's building mounted or ground mounted. And then just like with solar, nothing the city is doing with its approval is granting anybody any kind of a wind access easement. If the neighbor then plants a bunch of big tall trees, that's a private property owner issue. And then that same kind of right to entry language as well as removal should the structure become dilapidated, unused, abandoned. Okay, any questions on that one?
I have a question. We mentioned noise.
Yeah.
But I didn't see any DBA ratings or anything like that. Most of this noise thing is probably going to be the neighbor next door says, that thing is noisy and it's bothering me. How do we, I know we don't want to get involved in neighbors disagreeing with each other, but do we have a way of measuring noise? Do we have a noise standard? How does that work?
I was afraid you're going to talk about that because that means we kind of need to think about what might be in a nuisance code. So right now, we don't have anything specific about a noise and a noise standard. That's a lot to do with, that's why we want that really, really large setback to really help with that, to help keep it away from a neighbor or they might hear the whooshing or the spinning sound. If we want to get a little more specific than, what kind of the general statement in there, the kind of the typical way we now regulate noise is by setting a specific decibel rating based on the receiving property and typically based on the time of day, which also means having a sound meter and kind of having that whole section of your code. If that's something you want, we can sure do it. There's plenty of little model codes that we can just grab and drop it in there. But to go kind of beyond, that's kind of that next step is to have some kind of nuisance language in your city code in general.
Yeah, as long as there's an intention somewhere down the line to address that, because it'll probably come up.
And in fact, even going forward, that's something to think about. Are we running into a point where we're getting to be such a size city that we're having more noise complaints? And typically we look at it, it's mechanical noise complaint versus people yelling and screaming. So that hard way we now look at regulating those is literally with the sound meter and setting decibel limits.
And maintenance of these things, the general operation of them is probably not going to cause a lot of noise, but you get things like, bearings go bad and things like that, and they make bearing noise and things, that can be a nuisance, and it can get pretty loud sometimes.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, I'm adding that note that as we're working on some of the other sections of your code that we really need to think about that noise nuisance component.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a few questions. This badge has given me a new sense of purpose. If I'm reading this correctly, this is taking our current process and making it more just routine, which I think is great. However, let me ask you about our current process as it stands today. What are some of the benefits of having the current way in place versus making it more administrative?
Great question. So currently today, any type of solar, any type of wind requires that conditional use permit. And then you frankly do not have many regulations beyond that, what the standard are. And so it's a little bit of a, so what do we want to approve, not approve? And then there's that 5-year, limit, time limit, which is a really big deal because most solar and wind systems have a 20 to 25-year warranty. Well, so wind has a little bit less warranty. And so there's that aspect. And then the only deviation from process is truly the building mounted solar. So if it's freestanding solar or any type of wind has to have that conditional use permit, it's only the building mounted. And really, when we look at all the building mounted applications that come through, you're approving them all. And so really you're saving that property owner some time, you're saving yourselves some time and the city staff some time. Because in essence, you already are saying, yep, that's fine. That looks good. Nobody's complaining. We're all happy. And so it's your benefit right now is you're going to have a little more specific regulation. You're making kind of the easy solar a by right, yet we're not changing the process on the ones that maybe are a little more sensitive.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there a cost differential on the permitting versus current system versus the proposed new system?
Yeah, great question. So a short answer is we're making the cost on the building mounted solar a little bit cheaper because there's no application for the conditional use permit.
What are other similar communities doing, and are they doing this versus what we're doing currently?
Yeah, that's another great question. And so I'll stick with cities and I'll talk a little bit about counties. So most cities do have some type of regulation on solar and wind, and we generally are that same level of restriction. Building mounted solar, we're more permissive. Freestanding, we get a little more strict. And then wind, we tend to be very strict on the wind turbines. What I'd say is more cities are probably allowing us some type of a conditional use permit, that utility scale generation. In this case, kind of working with you, it was kind of my feeling that maybe that was something the community's not interested in. Frankly, this is also an issue that's being more wrestled at the county level because that's where we're seeing the utility scale, obviously the wind farms and the solar farms.
And then lastly, how flexible is this proposed system in terms of changing for kind of the ever changing landscape of alternative energies and all the new policies and systems that are coming down the pipe?
Yeah, that's another great question. So probably from a solar standpoint, I feel like the solar is very flexible. We're not being very specific on you've got to, have this type of system or this type of a warranty or, batteries are allowed or not allowed. So from the solar standpoint, I'd say this is very adaptable to change in technology. Now, where we're not very adaptable is over time, if wind suddenly got better, more efficient, more affordable, smaller in scale, that might be something where we come back and actually look to do a code update. Early on when wind showed up, we thought these building mounted uplift turbines would be really great. They turned out not to be super great. They were more expensive than the power they generated. And so we at one time looked at having building mounted as a really big thing. Someday maybe the technology improves. So I think on the wind turbine would be one over time might need to be updated if somebody really gets creative.
Thank you.
I'm good.
We're all aware of how quickly technology gets upgraded. I didn't see anything. And you mentioned earlier that most of these have like a 20-year warranty or 20-year lifespan, but I didn't see anything about upgrades, approval process, or total replacement because of improved technology.
So in the case of the building mounted solar, it's still just a building permit process. So in some cases, like if you're replacing a window in your house and it's the same window opening you had before, you're not getting a building permit. if you're adding a new, totally gutting your kitchen and doing a new electrical system, you're getting electrical permit, a plumbing permit. So the same thing on solar. If you're repairing and replacing something, an existing plug and play component, probably not getting built. But if you're tearing the whole thing off and doing something new, you're getting a new building permit. So the same thing would come into play if, let's say, you permitted a solar carport and they wanted to take it down and build something different. Depending on the level of change, it might require a new conditional use permit, or it could be considered repair and replacement of the same. So really consistent with, are you replacing siding? Are you replacing a brick facade with a new brick facade?
So it would be upon the owner to go to City Hall and ask City Hall if they need anything.
Kind of like any building construction project. So like your kitchen remodel, am I doing enough that I need a permit, or am I good to go from my, I'm just putting new siding on my garage? Nope, I'm good to go. So it's something we kind of see with anything in building inspection.
And to Jim's question about noise, I've been around some of the big solar or big wind turbines. And basically what you get is a whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. I assume the smaller ones we're addressing here don't have quite that level of noise. It's not
Right.
loud, but I can imagine that if it's close to your home, maybe even 150 feet, that it would be a little annoying, especially at night.
Yeah.
So, yeah, having some kind of provision for decibel level would probably be a good thing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And so if we work on a nuisance update or update to your nuisance code, a mechanical noise limit, because you think we do have air conditioners and all kinds of little things that generate noise. And so where is that kind of that threshold? And that's where we really look at that setback, because these smaller scale ones, they actually tend to be, not to nerd out on this, you have the horizontal axis, which is, think of your traditional kind of, farm mill pump. But then the vertical axis are the ones more likely in town, and they're spinning this way. They tend not to make very much noise. Now, the ones with the big blades, nope, I hear it too. It's the whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And then now you make me think of the farm windmill. They can sure squeak, but that's what we maintain bearings, right?
Well, and I know most of them, at least the commercial ones, the big ones, if they have some kind of a problem like that, they have their own control to shut them down.
Right, absolutely. And in
And
fact, most all of the systems do that are of any kind of scale and size.
Even the smaller ones
Have the addressing system for safety. Or shut down in high wind conditions. They want to hold themselves steady.
Thank you, Chris. Anything else? Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, you're
Sure.
welcome. Thanks for listening. There's so much with that. Just wait till we get to the sign code.
Okay. I believe we have to have a public hearing. I'll entertain a motion to open a public hearing.
I move that we open a public hearing, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second it.
All in favor, Blake?
Yes.
Stacy?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
I vote yes. Public hearing is now open. Do we have anyone that would like to speak to this? Anybody online? Okay. Then I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll move that we close the public hearing.
I'll second it.
All in favor, Blake?
Yes.
Stacy?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
I vote yes. Hearing is closed. And any further questions, comments, discussion? I will entertain a motion on the zoning regulation amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the zoning regulations text amendment as outlined in our packets.
A second.
I'll second it.
All in favor, Blake?
Yes.
Stacy?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Yes.
I vote yes. Motion passes 5-0. And now Marshall?
Okay, quick planning director's report. It's been a couple months since we've met, so looking back to the month of August, we had 12 single-family residential permits compared to 4 last year, and then in the month of September, we had 6 compared to 16 with last year, so we're up to a total of 54 for the year 2022. And then for multifamily residential permits, we had 1 in the month of August and none in the month of September, for a total of 4 for the year.
Anything further?
That is all I have.
And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Hey, can I just say a thank you right quick? I wanted to thank Leslie and the team or whoever was involved in reacting to the concerns that I voiced about the monument on Pinehurst. It looks beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for reminding us of.
Yeah.
State of disrepair.
Yeah. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I think Cameron, maybe you would like to share the development now. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Like to see.
I don't know if this works or not. It never wants to work for me. So this is the project development map that we have been working on. This should be coming out on a monthly basis. After tonight, I will be emailing this instead of speaking about it. But this is just a general overview of current projects that we have going on within the city. You have your interactive map at the start of the page and zoom in, you can zoom out, you can scroll around on that one if you would like to. Beneath this, they will break out into sections. As an example, Mom's Biz, there will be a general location, what stage of the process they are in, and where they are located on this Esri map. And then below that, you will also have a site picture that is the most up to date as to what is going on at that site. Yes, so going down, we also have Tomahawk Valley Park Phase 1. This park will be completed by the end of 2022. That is the general location. That is the site map. We also have Basehor Town Square. Confluence is currently working on a sub-area plan for this, so more to come. You also have your general site photo of that area. Below that, we have Fat Cats. Permits were just issued for that. You have your general location and your site picture as well. Now we have Honey Creek subdivision. They are under review for their construction documents. You have your general location and then your site picture as what's going on today. First State Bank development has commenced. This is a commercial business. And then your Esri map, below that, you have your site picture. So stuff is actually moving on that site. Greyhawk 4th plat construction documents are currently being reviewed. You have your general location and then your site picture underneath. And then last but not least, Memory Care Center on Pinehurst Drive. Development is underway for this one. And then below that, you have your most up-to-date construction picture. That is it. This will be coming out on a monthly basis.
When you say coming, oh, sorry. When you say coming out, what does that mean? I mean, do we go somewhere and have to find this on the internet? or-
So I will be directly emailing you the link to
Oh.
view this one.
Nice.
So if you do have questions, you can most definitely respond over email or you can call City Hall and ask for me.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah.
If you can back up, I think one slide there. The magenta,
Yes.
any update on that?
So we are still waiting for submittals of their electric plans currently, but we are reviewing all of their other construction documents.
Thank you. And I apologize. You talked to me about your project list, but it wasn't on there. And that's Diane's fault.
No, this is last minute. This is all me. I'm so sorry.
This is great. I like this.
Okay, I will also welcome any comments, any suggestions. Let me know what you guys want to see.
Thank you very much. Anything else? See, I asked Marshall, if we had anything else,
Yes, see,
and he said no.
I didn't. It was a mystery to all of us.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I
I'll
second.
All in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Stacy?
Yes.
Yes. Vote yes. Me.